There is a ton of just great, valuable information right here. We're getting things started, prepping the groundwork, the foundation for this upcoming war. We know the locations, we know the goals, we know the players. So of course, we need to give them a push. We need to give direction, we need to give guidance, but we also need to give personality, characterization. How do all of these people feel? How do they operate? The more we know about the cogs in this situation, how they conflict with each other, how they think, how they act, the more personality comes out to play, the more we can drive this situation forward. Because realistically, it's pretty simple, right? The plan that Chihiro wants to do, not the most complex. Chihiro wants to take Hikuri to the sword bearers so Hikuri can use the spirit energy of the sword bearers to teleport the swords back to them. Makes sense, right? Very straightforward. Now all of these sword bearers are scattered across the country and they're in these big fortresses known as Sanso. When we found out about this, it's been referenced non-stop. A lot of power, a lot of energy, a lot of money. Big hitters are protecting these bearers. That makes sense too. It's not going to be easy for anyone to get in, let alone the Hishaku. But it does raise a question. How much can you split? How much power and resources can you put into different locations? We know that the Kamunabi here, where Chihiro is currently, is operating at a low frequency. They don't have a lot of members, they don't have a lot of reinforcements, they don't have a lot of power behind them other than the big hitters themselves. The army that you would think that they have, the money, the millions, whatever it may be, is all associated with protecting these bearers. So tell me why that the first place that the Hishaku actually attack is one of these compounds. They're going straight for the sword bearers, and logically you think, okay, makes sense. Perhaps they feel confident that they can overthrow all of this supposed power and influence that these compounds withhold. Maybe it's not that simple. Sure, there's going to be a lot of power there regardless, but if there is any chance of insider information, people that you can't trust, information getting sold off to the Hishaku so they can enter these fortresses easier, then you best believe they're going to exploit it. And I do wonder if that question will be raised, because again, they mention this constantly that these things are well guarded. Now we have not seen the scaling of that power. So the members that attack in this chapter is a handful of people, no more than 10, that all have abilities equivalent to the enchanted swords. Now we know what that is, the Datanseki, the stones that the Hishaku have been trying to create and perfect, and we know that there's a lot of power within them. What we also know is that they don't last very long, so potentially this is more of a glass cannon situation with how they broke into the compound, or they have perfected more so over time the Datanseki formula, and they're able to utilize those stones efficiently. That is a very big problem. This is what interrupts the entire interview process with the Kamunabi, puts them under pressure. They couldn't make a choice, they couldn't decide, they were back and forth, they were poking and probing all different angles for Chihiro and his plan and the whole agenda behind it. You see a ton of different personality come out to play, a really great showcase of the differences within the Kamunabi. I mentioned this before, but I don't really trust a lot of people within here, and the more we see of their personalities, the more we can perhaps start to theory craft on who is associated where. There is a high chance that perhaps at least two of these people are working directly with the Hishaku. If Azami is more so connected with Shiba and Chihiro's group, some are going to be pure and then some are going to be problematic. While there is nothing that alludes to that idea, it should still be kept in the back of your mind. Not to mention, the Hishaku just brute forced their way into one of those compounds, which by all means is believable with the Datanseki stones and the amount of people that they had. It could be a whole lot easier if they do have insider information to break through using a weak point. I really enjoyed the Kamunabi interview. Again, a lot of personalities. It's great. There's one hothead in here that does not take a bar of Chihiro whatsoever. Honestly just hates him. And you could say, oh, he's playing the bad cop. I honestly just think he's a bastard. He's just rude. No care, no consideration of Chihiro or even this plan. Even some things that he scoffs or mentions doesn't really make sense to me. Firstly, he is upset that Chihiro destroyed Cloud Gauger. Logically, that should be a good thing. Even though the Kamunabi want more power, they want the swords, the fact that one is out of anyone's hands, doesn't have a bearer, it's not in the Hishaku's hands, and it's gone from existence, is kind of a win-win. Sure, you don't get your power, but no one else gets it either. Be happy for that. Secondly, he also mentions killing Chihiro to break the deadlock. That doesn't make sense either. You kill someone that is technically innocent, not judging them on their character or even the actions that they've done just because you want to break the deadlock, but it doesn't. You gain one sword that you can't wield, that you can't train a bearer for. So what are you doing? I don't know if this person is purposefully stupid or if he's just hot-headed and that's the representation of one side of the Kamunabi, because all of them aren't like that. He's the one taking control, but he's clearly not the defining leader. You know what I mean? Usually in a group situation like this, you'll have at least one or two defining leaders that really set the motion. And sure, maybe he was trying to do that, but he gets reeled back in very quickly by the other two people that seem a lot more informative on the situation, a lot more curious about Chihiro's plan, and a lot more curious about Hakuri and taking into consideration heavily Hayuki's recommendation. Just to throw the curveball out there, I wouldn't be surprised if this hothead person is one of two things. One, he's actually one of the more pure persons in here and really cares about the Kamunabi and the general public safety. Secondly, maybe something that's a little bit too obvious, he's actually the person supplying information to the Hishaku, or is a little bit more corrupt than you think. I would like more so the reversal, where he's actually a good person and cares a lot, he's just very hot-headed and very straight to the point. It's hard for him to trust Chihiro just based on Chihiro's actions, even though he has done a lot of good things. He stopped the auction, for example, he stopped Sojo, and he reclaimed Shinichi or Magatsumi. Three massive things that the Kamunabi had no touch or control in whatsoever. Chihiro plays this card perfectly as well, saying that he saved them a bunch of money. So right here, you have the perfect description of Chihiro, that he's not going to injure people, he's not going to kill the sword bearers, only kills evildoers, he saved you a ton of money, he stopped 3 situations constantly ongoing that the Kamunabi couldn't, and is offering one of his own swords. Quite literally, this is the best situation that the Kamunabi have. Within this meeting, when they find out that the Hishaku have invaded that compound and obliterated the fortress, all of the pressure just gets dumped into Chihiro. But suddenly they don't care about the logistics. And now the proposal that Chihiro is bringing forward makes a lot more sense. However, they are still very cautious because there's 2 things that happen here. Firstly, they plan to send Chihiro and Hakuri out to reclaim the sword bearer. They are on the run, they survived the attack, and they're out there in the wilderness. So it's going to be a pretty hectic thing to get them out there and operating. I don't know why you would send only those 2. Maybe send Hayuki as well. Maybe send another person. If this is someone that you don't necessarily trust, or you're having a difficult time to trust them, maybe send another person with them just to, you know, feel it out. Sure, they might not be able to spread themselves that thin, but at the same time, Chihiro has a sword that you want. So even if he gets killed out there by the Hishaku, the person that's with them, maybe even following them if you send a spy out, can retrieve the sword. See how simple that is? Perhaps it's going to be close. I don't know the travel distance, I don't know how far away they are, but the Hishaku is going to be breathing down this person's neck all the way. And there's going to be some pretty big conflict. The second thing here, and the more important one, is that what Chihiro wants to do with the enchanted swords is not the same as what the Kamunabi want to do. He never really answered that question. And the Kamunabi know this, and they have no intention of letting him do as he pleases with the swords. So still, there is conflict. Chihiro knows this, the Kamunabi know this, they're not on equal terms. And that is the most important thing, because that in itself is going to provide a fracture. Even if Chihiro wasn't here, it most likely would have fractured on its own, but now there's more pressure. Now the Hishaku are moving, now you know it is possible for them to obliterate some of these fortresses. No one is safe anymore. Realistically, they should be sending their strongest hitters, the biggest, baddest people that they have to the rest of these fortresses, and have the quickest or the sneakiest, Chihiro and Hakuri as well, pick up any sort of the remains. I would imagine that if they perhaps tried to play defensive, they will get rolled through. But that would come down to the amount of information that the Kamunabi have of the Dantenseki stone. Just based on the report, they don't seem to know why these individuals have powers equivalent of the enchanted swords. Chihiro does, he's witnessed it firsthand, and no one else has. So it's going to be a rude awakening, and I wonder if Chihiro is going to use that to his advantage. Sure, he's purposefully withholding information, but it might allow him some sort of leverage. It is going to get a whole lot more complicated and a whole lot more difficult. The fights that are brewing though, the conflict is looking immaculate. I don't know what Hishaku generals are going to be out to play, but you best believe they're going to bring out some big hitters, and I'm very curious to see how this Dantenseki stone is going to evolve over time. Surely they haven't perfected it yet, but if they're getting closer, if they're changing it drastically, if they're experimenting more and more, you're going to see some crazy abilities come out to play. more and more things are getting up to the par of those enchanted swords, and that is a really bad thing. But overall, it will make for some amazing fights, that's for sure.